Look, I need you to stop what you're doing right now and listen carefully, because what I'm about to share could mean the difference between protecting your wealth and watching it vanish overnight, and I'm not being dramatic here. This is happening right now as we speak, and most people have no idea. You know that gold and silver sitting in your safe? The bars, the coins, the precious metals you've been stacking away thinking you're protected from whatever economic chaos comes next? There's a problem. A big one. And it's not what you think. See, everyone's focused on the wrong threat. They're worried about theft, about someone breaking into their home. They've got their safes bolted down, their security systems armed, their insurance policies updated. But they're missing the real danger, the one that's already inside the safe with their metal. Let me paint you a picture of what's actually happening right now in the precious metals market. Because this is where the story gets interesting. We're seeing something that hasn't happened in over 40 years. Something that historically has preceded every major wealth transfer in modern history. The spread between paper gold and physical gold is widening, not by a little. We're talking about premiums on physical metal that are hitting levels we haven't seen since the Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market back in 1980. Think about that for a second. When was the last time you saw 1-ounce American gold eagles trading at $400, $500, sometimes $600 over spot price? When was the last time you called a dealer and they told you they're out of stock, delivery times are 8 weeks, and oh, by the way, the price just went up again while you were on hold? This is not normal market behavior. This is what happens when the paper market and the physical market start to divorce. And when that divorce becomes final, when those two prices completely separate, everyone holding paper promises is going to find out the hard way what their contracts are really worth. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what nobody's talking about. The metal sitting in your safe right now? It's caught in the middle of the biggest monetary experiment in human history, and the outcome of that experiment is going to determine whether your stack protects you or fails you when you need it most. Let me explain what I mean. Right now, we've got central banks around the world buying gold at a pace we've never seen before. The World Gold Council just reported that central banks purchased over 1,000 tons of gold in a single year. 1,000 tons. That's not normal accumulation. That's panic buying. That's preparation for something big. And it's not just the usual suspects. Sure, China's been buying, Russia's been buying, but now you've got Poland buying, Singapore buying, India buying. Even central banks that historically held zero gold are suddenly scrambling to acquire physical metal. Why? What do they know that they're not telling us? Here's what they know. They know that the dollar-based system we've been living under since 1971 is reaching its expiration date. They know that when Nixon closed the gold window and took us off the gold standard, he didn't end the gold standard, he just postponed it. And now, 50-plus years later, the bill is coming due. Think about what's happened since 1971. We went from a system where dollars were backed by gold, where you could actually exchange your paper for metal, to a system where dollars are backed by nothing but trust and the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. And for 50 years that worked. The world accepted it. They had no choice. If you wanted to buy oil, you needed dollars. If you wanted to participate in international trade, you needed dollars. The dollar was the reserve currency and everyone played along. But something's changing. Fast. You've got the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now they're adding more members. And they're all talking about settling trade in their own currencies. They're talking about a gold-backed trade currency. They're talking about bypassing the dollar entirely. And here's the thing that should terrify anyone paying attention. When you look at history, every single time a reserve currency has lost its status, every single time, the transition has been violent. Not necessarily militarily violent, though sometimes that too, but economically violent. Wealth gets destroyed. Savings get wiped out. The middle class gets crushed. It happened to the British pound after World War II. Britain went from ruling an empire where the sun never set to rationing food and imposing capital controls practically overnight. The pound lost 70% of its value in a decade. People who thought they were wealthy, who had their savings in pounds, who trusted the system, they woke up one day and realized they were poor. And here's what nobody wants to admit. The same thing is being set up right now with the dollar. The signs are everywhere if you know where to look. You've got the Federal Reserve's balance sheet that's exploded from under $1 trillion to over $8 trillion in just 15 years. You've got government debt that's approaching $36 trillion with no plan to ever pay it back. You've got interest payments on that debt that now exceed our entire defense budget. But the real tell, the thing that keeps me up at night, is what's happening in the Treasury market. Because the Treasury market is supposed to be the safest, most liquid market in the world. It's the foundation of the entire global financial system. And it's starting to crack. We're seeing auctions where the Treasury Department struggles to find buyers. We're seeing foreign central banks, who used to be the biggest buyers of U.S. debt, selling their holdings. China's dumping treasuries, Japan's dumping treasuries, Saudi Arabia's dumping treasuries. And who's buying? The Federal Reserve. The Fed is buying our own debt, printing money to finance our own government spending. That's not a sustainable system. That's a Ponzi scheme. And this is where your metal comes in. Because when this system finally breaks, and it will break, the question isn't whether gold and silver will be valuable. Of course they will. They've been valuable for 5,000 years. They'll be valuable for the next 5,000. The question is whether the metal you own will actually be accessible to you when you need it. And this is the security alert that everyone needs to understand. Because there are 3 ways to own precious metals, and only one of them is going to protect you when things get really bad. First, you've got paper gold, ETFs, mining stocks, futures contracts, certificates. This is what most people own because it's easy. You click a button, you buy some shares, and boom, you're exposed to gold. Except you don't actually own gold. You own a promise that someone, somewhere, will give you gold if you ask for it. And when everyone asks for it at the same time, which is exactly what happens in a crisis, you're going to find out that there's not enough gold to go around. The paper market is leveraged anywhere from 100 to 1 to 300 to 1. That means for every ounce of physical gold that actually exists, there are 100 to 300 claims on that same ounce. When the music stops, somebody's not getting a chair. Second, you've got allocated storage. This is where you buy physical gold, but you let someone else hold it for you. A bank, a vault company, a dealer, they give you a certificate that says you own X amount of gold and it's sitting in their vault with your name on it. This is better than paper gold because the metal actually exists. But here's the problem. When the crisis hits, when the government starts imposing capital controls, when they start restricting the movement of precious metals, which they absolutely will because they've done it before, your gold is sitting in their vault, not yours. And good luck getting it out. Remember what happened in 1933? Executive Order 6102. President Roosevelt made it illegal for U.S. citizens to own gold. He forced everyone to turn in their gold to the government at $20.67 per ounce. And then, after he'd collected all the gold, he revalued it to $35 per ounce. Instant wealth transfer from the people to the government. And if you didn't comply, 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, which in 1933, money was a fortune. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen again exactly like that, but I am saying that when governments get desperate, and they are getting desperate, they do desperate things. And if your gold is sitting in someone else's vault with your name in their database, you're making it really easy for them to find it. Which brings us to the third way to own precious metals: physical metal in your possession, in your safe, under your control. This is what the smart money is doing. This is what the central banks are doing. They're not buying ETFs. They're not buying certificates. They're buying physical bars and coins, and they're taking delivery, and they're storing it in their own vaults. But even this, even physical metal in your possession, comes with a security issue that most people don't think about. And this is the real alert. Your metal is only as secure as your ability to access it when you need it. And I'm not just talking about physical security, although that matters too. I'm talking about legal security, tax security, regulatory security. Because here's what's coming, and you can see it being set up right now if you're paying attention. The government is building a system to track and control every financial transaction. They're calling it different things: digital currency, central bank digital currency, modernizing the payment system. But what it really is a system where they can see every dollar you spend, every asset you own, every transaction you make. And more importantly, a system where they can control it, where they can turn off your access if they decide you're doing something they don't like. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but I've got physical gold and silver. They can't control that. And you're right. They can't control the metal itself, but they can control what you can do with it. They can make it illegal to use it as money. They can impose reporting requirements. They can tax transactions. They can make it so difficult and so expensive to actually use your metal that it becomes effectively worthless for anything except holding and hoping. And this is already starting to happen. You've got states imposing sales tax on precious metals purchases. You've got the IRS treating gold and silver as collectibles, which means you pay a 28% capital gains tax instead of the normal 15 or 20%. You've got reporting requirements for transactions over $10,000. You've got dealers who are required to file forms with the government every time you buy or sell certain products. The noose is tightening. Slowly, gradually, but it's tightening. And most people don't even notice because it's happening one small regulation at a time. So what's the solution? How do you actually protect yourself? How do you make sure that the metal you've worked so hard to accumulate is actually going to be there for you when you need it? This is where it gets interesting because there's actually a way to own physical precious metals that gives you all the benefits of having metal in your possession, but with legal protections that most people don't even know exist. And it's something that the wealthy have been using for decades, but that's only recently become accessible to regular people. I'm talking about holding precious metals inside a retirement account, a gold IRA. Now, before you tune out thinking this is some complicated financial product, hear me out, because this is actually simpler and more powerful than most people realize. Here's how it works. You take money from your existing retirement accounts, your 401k, your traditional IRA, whatever you've got, and you roll it over into a self-directed IRA that allows you to hold physical precious metals. Not ETFs, not mining stocks, actual physical gold and silver bars and coins. And here's the beautiful part. It's stored in an IRS-approved depository, which means it's secure, it's insured, and most importantly, it's protected by retirement account laws. What does that mean? It means the government can't just seize it. It means creditors can't touch it. It means it's protected from lawsuits. And it means you're not paying taxes on any gains until you take distributions in retirement. And if you do it right with a Roth IRA, you never pay taxes on the gains at all. Now, I put together a free guide that walks through exactly how this works, how to set it up, what the costs are, what products you can hold, all of that. It's in the description below. And look, this isn't for everyone. If you've got less than $100,000 in retirement accounts, it probably doesn't make sense because of the setup costs. But if you're sitting on 6 figures or more in a 401k or IRA, and you're worried about what's coming, this is something you need to look at. Because here's the thing, the window for doing this is closing. Not tomorrow, not next week, but it's closing. As more people figure this out, as more money flows into physical precious metals, the government is going to step in. They always do. They're going to change the rules. They're going to impose restrictions. They're going to make it harder or more expensive or maybe even impossible to do this. And when that happens, everyone who waited is going to be stuck holding paper assets in a system that's collapsing. All right, so let's get back to what's happening right now in the precious metals market, because this is where things get really interesting. We've established that there's a divergence happening between paper and physical. We've established that central banks are accumulating at record pace. But what's driving this? What's the actual mechanism that's creating this pressure? It comes down to supply and demand, but not in the way most people think. See, everyone focuses on mine supply, how much gold and silver is being pulled out of the ground each year. And yeah, that matters. But that's not where the real story is. The real story is in above-ground supply, the metal that already exists, the metal that's sitting in vaults, in safes, in jewelry boxes, in industrial stockpiles. Because unlike oil or wheat or other commodities that get consumed, precious metals don't disappear. Every ounce of gold that's ever been mined still exists somewhere. It just changes hands. And right now, we're seeing something remarkable. The above-ground supply that's available for sale is drying up. Not because there's less gold and silver in the world. There's actually more than ever. but because the people who own it aren't selling. They're holding. And in some cases, they're buying more. This is what's called strong hands accumulation. It's when metal moves from weak hands, people who are trading it, speculating on it, treating it like just another investment, to strong hands, people who are buying it and putting it away for the long term. Central banks, sovereign wealth funds, ultra-high net worth individuals. These are entities that don't sell. They accumulate and they hold. And when you get strong hands accumulation happening, at the same time that physical demand is surging, you get a supply squeeze. And supply squeezes in precious metals are unlike supply squeezes in any other market because of the way the market is structured. Let me explain what I mean. The precious metals market operates on two levels. You've got the physical market, where actual metal changes hands, and you've got the paper market, where contracts and derivatives trade. And the paper market is massive compared to the physical market. We're talking about hundreds of times more volume in paper than in physical. Now, under normal circumstances, this works fine. The paper market provides liquidity. It allows producers to hedge. It allows investors to gain exposure without taking delivery. The two markets stay roughly in sync because there's an arbitrage mechanism. If paper gold trades too far below physical gold, arbitrageurs can buy paper, take delivery, and sell physical for a profit. If paper trades too far above physical, they can do the reverse. But this mechanism only works if you can actually take delivery. And right now, taking delivery is getting harder and harder. The COMEX, which is the main exchange where gold and silver futures trade, is seeing record numbers of delivery requests. People are standing for delivery instead of rolling their contracts forward, and the exchange is struggling to source the metal. You're seeing the same thing in London at the LBMA, the London Bullion Market Association. Normally, when you buy gold in London, you're buying unallocated gold. That means you have a claim on a pool of gold, but you don't own specific bars. It's like a bank account. The bank doesn't keep your specific dollars in a vault with your name on them. They keep a pool of dollars and you have a claim on that pool. But more and more buyers are demanding allocated gold. They want specific bars with specific serial numbers assigned to them. And when everyone starts demanding allocated instead of unallocated, the system starts to strain because there's not enough physical metal to back all the unallocated claims. This is exactly what happened in the silver market back in 2021. Remember the Wall Street silver movement? A bunch of retail investors on Reddit decided to try to squeeze the silver market by buying physical silver and taking it off the market. And it worked. Sort of. Premiums on physical silver exploded. Dealers ran out of inventory. The spread between paper silver and physical silver blew out to levels we hadn't seen in decades. Now, the squeeze didn't break the market. The powers that be managed to contain it. They raised margin requirements on silver futures. They restricted trading. They did what they always do when the little guy starts winning. They changed the rules. But here's what's different this time. This time it's not just retail investors buying physical metal. It's central banks. It's sovereign wealth funds. It's institutional buyers who can't be shut out or restricted. And they're not buying to make a quick profit. They're buying because they're losing faith in the dollar-based system. And this is where we need to talk about what's really happening with the dollar, because this is the core of everything. The dollar's dominance as the global reserve currency is based on two things. First, the petrodollar system, where oil is priced and traded in dollars, which creates constant demand for dollars. And second, the treasury market, where foreign countries park their dollar reserves in U.S. government bonds. Both of these pillars are cracking. The petrodollar system is breaking down as more and more oil trades are being settled in other currencies. China's buying oil from Saudi Arabia in yuan. India's buying oil from Russia in rupees. The UAE is accepting payment in dirhams. Every one of these transactions is a crack in the foundation. And the treasury market, as I mentioned earlier, is showing signs of stress. Foreign buyers are stepping back. Yields are rising. The Fed is having to step in as the buyer of last resort. This is not sustainable. So what happens when these two pillars collapse? What happens when the dollar loses its reserve currency status? History gives us a pretty clear answer. The currency devalues. Rapidly. We're talking about a potential loss of 50, 60, 70% of purchasing power over a relatively short period of time. Now, the government and the Fed will do everything they can to prevent this. They'll raise interest rates to defend the dollar. They'll impose capital controls to prevent money from fleeing. They'll restrict the movement of assets, including precious metals. They'll do whatever it takes to maintain control. But here's the thing about currency crises. Once they start, they're almost impossible to stop, because they're driven by psychology, by confidence, or more accurately, by the loss of confidence. And once people lose confidence in a currency, once they start dumping it as fast as they can, the central bank can't print confidence. They can print more currency, but that just makes the problem worse. This is what happened in Weimar Germany in the 1920s. The government kept printing more marks to pay its debts, and the more marks they printed, the less each mark was worth, which meant they had to print even more marks, which made them worth even less. It's a death spiral, and it ended with people using marks as wallpaper, because the paper was worth more than the currency printed on it. Now, I'm not saying we're going to see Weimar-level hyperinflation in the United States. The dollar is still the global reserve currency. The U.S. economy is still the largest in the world. The U.S. military still backs the system. But I am saying that the risk is higher than it's been in our lifetimes, and the smart money is preparing for that risk. And this is where gold and silver come in. Because throughout history, in every currency crisis, in every monetary collapse, in every period of high inflation or hyperinflation, precious metals have maintained their purchasing power. Not because gold and silver go up in value. They don't. An ounce of gold today buys roughly the same amount of goods and services that an ounce of gold bought 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. Gold doesn't go up. Currencies go down. And gold maintains its value while the currency collapses around it. This is why central banks hold gold. This is why the wealthy hold gold. Not because they think it's going to make them rich, but because they know it's going to preserve their wealth when everything else is falling apart. But here's the critical point that brings us back to the security alert. Having gold and silver is necessary but not sufficient. You also need to have it in a form and in a location where you can actually access it and use it when you need it. And this is where most people get it wrong. They buy gold and silver, they put it in a safe, and they think they're done. But they haven't thought through the scenarios. They haven't thought about what happens if the government imposes capital controls. What happens if they restrict the movement of precious metals? What happens if they require reporting for all transactions? What happens if they simply make it illegal to use gold and silver as money, which they've done before and they can do again? In these scenarios, having metal in a safe in your house might not be enough, because if you can't legally sell it, if you can't legally trade it, if you can't legally use it, then what good is it? It's just a shiny paperweight. This is why the structure matters. This is why holding precious metals in a protected structure, like a retirement account, gives you options that you don't have with metal sitting in a safe. Because retirement accounts have legal protections. They're protected from creditors, they're protected from lawsuits, and most importantly, they're protected by laws that the government is very reluctant to change because millions of voters have retirement accounts. Could the government change those laws? Sure. They can do anything, but it's a lot harder politically to seize assets from retirement accounts than it is to seize assets from private safes, because when you go after retirement accounts, you're going after the middle class. You're going after voters. You're going after the people who still have some political power. Whereas when you go after gold in private safes, you're going after a much smaller group. A group that's easier to demonize. A group that's easier to paint as hoarders or speculators or people who aren't paying their fair share. This is exactly what happened in 1933. Roosevelt didn't go after everyone's wealth. He went after gold specifically. He made it illegal to own gold. But you know what he didn't make illegal? Owning stocks, owning bonds, owning real estate, just gold. Because gold was the one asset that represented a direct threat to the government's ability to devalue the currency. And we're seeing the same setup today. The government is building the infrastructure to track and control financial assets. They're pushing digital currency. They're expanding reporting requirements. They're increasing enforcement. All of this is laying the groundwork for what comes next. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying you need to panic. What I am saying is that the risk is real, it's growing, and the time to prepare is before the crisis, not during it. Because here's what happens during a crisis. Premiums on physical metal explode. Availability disappears. Dealers run out of inventory. Delivery times stretch from days to weeks to months. And if you're trying to set up a gold IRA or move assets around during a crisis, good luck. The system gets overwhelmed. Processing times extend. And you might find yourself stuck in the old system while it's collapsing around you. This is why the wealthy prepare in advance. They don't wait for the crisis. They see it coming and they position themselves before it hits. And right now, all the signs are pointing to something big coming.